If you were to choose just one dish, let's say you had somebody coming over for dinner and you had to choose just one dish that says, "This is who I am," or a dish that says, "This is really important to me," what would it be? Hi guys, my name is Davinia and I'm a food photographer. Thank you so much for stopping by. This is actually my first video and the first in what will be a 4 to 5 part series in what I call DOP Food Stories. So what is DOP Food Stories and why am I finding it on a food photography channel? Well, in essence, DOP Food Stories is an opportunity to sit down with friends, families, and strangers to talk about a dish which is important to them. A dish which may evoke a sense of nostalgia, a dish which may transport them back to a period of time in their childhood. When I think about food, not only am I thinking about the nutritional elements to it, but I'm also thinking about who did I eat this with? How did it make me feel? What does it look like? What does it taste like? Can I replicate this? And so being able to sit down with my guests in this season of DOP Food Stories has been a real honour, just to hear why this particular dish is important to them. In terms of the second question, why am I finding it on a food photography channel? Please check out Davinia O Photography, where I just try to honour the dish in some way through image. Today we'll be speaking to Sharlynne, who will be sharing her journey in a culinary and social sense about her journey from Zimbabwe to England. Today's dish is Sadza. Hey Shaz, thank you so much for joining me today on DOP Food Stories. I'm so grateful to have you here. Thank you for coming along. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
um, Disclaimer, there's a bit of a lag in our internet, and so I think there might be times when we'll speak over each other, or it might seem like we don't want to chat because we're trying to hear what the other person said and there's a bit of a delay in responding. But that's what's going on there. So can you tell me a little bit about yourself, heritage, identity? What's your cultural background?
So I am born and partly raised in Zimbabwe, which is in southern Africa. I was born in the capital Harare. That's where I lived for most of my life, early years of my life, and I emigrated to England at the age of 9. My parents are both Zimbabwean. Their parents are both Zimbabwean, but I guess our ancestry is British, Dutch, and African. Yeah.
Okay. So what was that like growing up in Zimbabwe? Do you have any memories of that kind of early childhood?
Yeah, so I'm actually really grateful that I remember quite a lot.
Mm.
And yeah, so it was very different to how it is here. Um, Obviously, the biggest change is probably the weather. So lovely sunshine, nice and warm. um, and yeah, I guess like I've got a big family, so we all kind of lived quite close to each other, and
Mm.
so that was quite nice. And yeah, there was a lot of emphasis placed on um, sort of our culture, our foods, our language. Even though unfortunately I can't speak any of the
I
languages.
was about to
Um,
ask.
yeah, so I started learning, obviously what you learn as you grow, but I
Yeah.
think it just not being able to practice it once we moved, just yeah, kind of lost most, if not all of it. So yeah.
Mm. So what is the language that your family speaks? I'm assuming your mum and your dad speak the language.
So my mum doesn't, but my dad
Okay.
does. So well, he speaks and understands two. One language is called Shona, and the other one is called Ndebele. But
Okay.
there's many other different dialects, like depending on where you come from in the country, and so yeah,
Yeah.
uh, yeah.
Would it would you say you understand the language if it's spoken to you? So you might not speak it, but do you understand it, or do you understand kind of like key words or
I feel like I would understand the very most minimal amount possible. There might be one or two words,
yeah.
um, but funnily enough, I remember a song from childhood. Um, it's it's kind of like a nursery rhyme, but it's in Shona, and I remember all the words to that, and
Ah.
partly some of its meaning. But yeah, it's something I do want to learn, Shona. I do want to be able
Yeah.
to sort of. pass something down to my children from my culture. So yeah.
Yeah, and we're going to pick up on that a bit later about the importance, or if it feels important to you to be able to pass some of that kind of heritage and culture down to your children. But just kind of going back to being in Zimbabwe a little bit, do you remember what school was like, or what was school dinners like being in Zimbabwe?
So school's very different to here. We start sort of at like 8, but we would finish by lunchtime. So there wasn't a school dinner sort of or lunchtime situation. We would be at home for lunch. So most of the time it was cooked food, which is obviously a big contrast to packed lunches and school dinners here. So yeah. Most of the time we were eating at home. We'd come home and the food would be ready for us to eat. So
yeah, I'm assuming that the early finishes is because of the heat. So like in Spain you might have a siesta or whatever because it was the hottest at midday. So I'm assuming,
I think that's probably part of it.
Yeah. And so when you would go home for lunch, what would be a typical lunch that you would have?
It could be anything really: rice, pasta, leftover food from the night before, or freshly cooked, like breakfast stuff. Not breakfast, but like eggs and that kind of thing. I think it was just whatever my mum or whoever was cooking felt like doing.
Yeah. So what was that migration from Zimbabwe, if you can remember it? So you said you were 9 years old when you came from Zimbabwe. What was that like, kind of transitioning to coming over to England, and that transition, and then starting a new school, adjusting to different kind of cultures and I guess customs?
I think it was very strange for me. Things that I thought were quite normal. I remember when I first started school here, it made me very cautious or very hesitant to just do normal things, because I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know if that's how we do things here. I don't know
like what?
Like loads so I remember actually I think it was like the first week that I was at school, and we went on a school trip. So I think it's year 5 when you're 9. Yeah, I think I was year 5, and I was singing to myself, and the person who was sitting next to me on the coach like kind of heard me singing and was like, "Are you singing or are you talking to yourself?" And I was like, "No, I didn't say anything."
That here?
I didn't say anything because I was like, "Oh my gosh, like, is that a normal thing? Do we not do that here?" Like, but I remember that was one of the very first things I was like, "Oh my gosh." And then things like food, like because we were used to having hot meals at lunchtime, we had packed lunches, but my mum used to give us the food that we would normally eat. And that was very strange to people because it's not a sandwich. So and then eventually, I had to kind of be like, "Mom, can you just give me sandwiches, please?"
So there's something about coming from one place and going to another place and kind of acclimatizing or assimilating into a new culture. And so you kind of mentioned that for a while your mum would make you the same lunches that you would have when you were in Zimbabwe, but then after a while you're like, "No, mum, you need to just like I need sandwiches with cheese." I don't want to be othered, basically. But what was that process like for you? Or can you remember a point where you might have been like, "Actually, no, I want to reconnect with that, with who I am being Zimbabwe."
So I think when I got to secondary school, I think it was, I would say, secondary school, I became more comfortable with the fact that we are different, because I wasn't born here, I wasn't growing up here, so my way of life was different before. Obviously there are some things that will change. You do tend to assimilate anyway, but by the time I got to secondary school, my packed lunches were the bomb. And all my friends were like, "Oh, I wish your mum could make me packed lunch." And I was like, sorry. And I think it's just acceptance, isn't it? Like initially you don't want to be treated differently, you don't want to not be accepted. So you do everything you can to be accepted, to be the same. And then, until you get to the point where you realize that actually it's not, no one's gonna not want to talk to you because you have a different lunch to them, or do you know what I mean? So and I think, with my mom, as much as she did try to, she did make the sandwiches after we asked and stuff, there was still that element of actually we're still having the foods at home. And I guess secondary school's there's a lot more people, it's a lot bigger than primary school. So you encounter other people who also have cooked food in their packed lunch, or also have the curry that smells, or whatever it is. And so it then becomes the norm. You're just like, oh, okay, actually, it's not just me. There are 10 other people also having, we can sit all together and have our curries or whatever it is. So yeah, I think it's just coming to that realization that it's okay. Like, being different is fine.
Yeah. Do you know what? And so I feel like that process for me in terms of being who I am kind of happened or wanting to reconnect with who I am, happened for me in college. But what I found really interesting in my adult years, literally about 2 years ago, was when I was working in a local authority. And when I went, so before that, sorry, I was working in probation in Surrey, and it was frowned upon if you bought something like salmon and heated that up in the microwave because it smelt blah, blah, blah. There was just this unspoken rule that you never bought salmon. So I always tended to bring cold food, even though I love hot food. Like, what is cold? What's a sandwich to me anyway? I need rice and I need pasta. So anyway, so then when I went over to the local authority, and they were eating pounded yam. And I was like, for lunch, I felt liberated. I was like, this is home. For me, this is where I need to be.
You just need that one person, you just need that one person. You just need to smell that whiff of jollof when you're walking to the staff room. Like, oh, we're doing that? Okay, cool.
I'm over here.
I'm over here. Well, I'm coming tomorrow. Let's share, But, yeah.
Exactly. So would you mind telling me what the dish is that we're speaking about today and why it's important to you?
Yes. So the dish that is very, very special to me is called Sadza. So Sadza is actually the name of the particular food, but obviously you can have different accompaniments with it. Okay. And for me, culturally, it's just something that I've had from a baby, I would say, growing up. It's a traditional dish. It's made in different ways by obviously different people who come from different areas. But it's sort of universal in the sense that if you go to anything in Zimbabwe, a party, weddings, baptisms, funerals, someone there has made Sadza. Okay, you can eat it with your meat, your stew, your spinach, your cabbage. Yeah, you can. So it's something. Growing up, my mum always used to make it every Saturday. That was our thing. And it's just a part of our family, and it reminds me of home.
Yeah. So can you describe the dish to me? What does it look like and taste like?
So Sadza is made from maize. So it's white, and it's sort of cooked in water until it thickens up. It's very similar, I would say, probably to like pounded yam. That's probably the closest like other sort of African dish that you could get to it. You can have it with anything from stews, so a meat stew, to just a tomato-based sauce. You can have spinach with it. So traditionally, like when my mum would make it, we'd have it with spinach, like a spinach stew or a cabbage stew, and then you'd have like meat to go with it. So whether it's beef, lamb, pork, chicken, everything. So you can make sausage, anything. And then for different people do different things with it. So you can mix meat into the stew, or you can have it separate. So, and then, I mean, there's other things that people make with it. Okra, another thing that you can add to it. And then there's like traditional meats that people use, which I'm not a fan of. But,
like
something called matumbus.
Okay.
Which I do not like the smell or the taste of. Tripe is another thing. I'm okay, but it's whatever floats your boat, really.
So it sounds like it's quite so it has the key staples to it. So the fact, obviously, the maize, the sadza, and then the stew element, but it can vary from household to household depending on, I guess, your diet or whatever your preference is. So yesterday I had the viewing pleasure of the picture that you sent me with the dish that your mum had made. And so I think you described the sadza, the maize, with the stew that has spinach in it. But I also saw the green leaf that looked a bit kind of kale-ish in its consistency. What's that called?
So in Zimbabwe, it's something called Chamoria, which is sort of in between spinach and like kale. In terms of it's not as thick a leaf as kale, but it's not as thin as spinach, if that makes sense. And it's very leafy. It grows kind of like how kale would, big leaves rather than small leaves of spinach. But it's got its own flavor. Like it doesn't taste like spinach, and it doesn't taste like kale or spring beans. Like you will know it when you have it. You're like, yeah, this is choms. We call it choms for short. Like yeah. However, it is something that grows in warmer climates. So although my dad has been known to get it from here, you know, he might be just like in the market, Corridor Market, like Fulton Heath, wherever, and he's like, oh, I saw choms today, so I bought a bunch, like, and everyone's like, oh, what? And then you'll go back and you'll never see it there again. So it's just one of those things. But yeah, if I ever knew that my dad got it, I'm like, Mom, I'll be there.
I'm round, 10 minutes.
Yeah, literally, like, yeah. So
isn't that interesting? Sorry, go on.
No, yeah, you can have it with anything. People have it with baked beans. It's, you know, I mean, the sadza within itself it doesn't have a particular, I wouldn't say it's very flavorful or that, like, it doesn't have a particular flavor to it. It can be quite bland. But also there is a yellow version that you can make as well, which has more of a flavor. But that's not something that we traditionally, my mum always makes the white version. So yeah, you could just, anything you can add to it that's got a bit of sauce, a bit of flavor.
Yeah. And so in my culture, we would call it swallow. So it's literally the vehicle for the stew and the other accompaniments. But but even though you're saying it hasn't got much flavor, it still is key. So for example, so you mentioned pounded yam. I prefer pounded yam over maybe something like Eba or Gary, and because even though it hasn't got much of a flavor, there's still something about it that I still prefer the taste of it. It has a slight taste, and so I'm only assuming I haven't tasted sadza yet because your mum's gonna make it for me. Auntie, thank you, Auntie.
Don't worry,
I hope so.
And we eat it with our hands. We don't eat it with cutlery. We eat it with our hands, and it makes it taste even better. So,
yes, thank you. A woman after my own heart, because that is so true. And I'm really digressing, but rice tastes much better with a spoon. Yes.
It
does.
Definitely.
And so, can I ask, when you do your sadza, do you put a little hole when you do your round ball? Do you put a little hole in the ball so that your stew can sit inside the sadza? Do you know what I mean?
So it just depends, really. Some people do things like that. I mean, traditionally, I just slap it on my plate and then slap whatever's been made to go with it next to it. But if you go to like a wedding or a celebration, it's normally made like wrapped in balls in cling film. And that's how it will come on your plate. It will be like a little round ball. The other thing with sadza is it's normally served hot. So even if it's in the cling film, it's warmed up to it hot. Like when you go to take that first bit, your fingers will burn part of it, and everyone sits there. That is just part of that.
But that's part of it.
Yeah. So it's one of those things. Like for me growing up, whenever I think back to like parties and stuff, and you see people eating it, it's as if you're eating it in a hurry. Like
right.
Like yes, it's gonna taste good. Like I know it's gonna taste, but it's hot, so it's
yeah.
But I feel like that's part of the process. You can't eat it warm. It can't be cold. It can't, and it doesn't. I mean, it tastes okay reheated, but it's better when it's fresh. So literally, that's normally the last thing that's been cooked.
Okay.
And then when it's ready, like it's time to eat now. Like it's not time to play games.
So how do you manage that? Because that's so basically, as soon as it's served to you, you're like, because I'd be like, no distractions, phones off, kids, you need to go and play if you're not eating this because I'm about to eat and I need to eat it now. So it feel like a ceremony? So you know that it's coming, and so you kind of prepare yourself in a way to receive this food.
Yeah, so I think like for example, if we had kids growing up, if there was kids would be sort of given their food and go and sit down in the corner over there, Obviously, if they're very young, then they might have to be fed. And most of the time, they'll be fed off their parents' plate. Like, mum's eating, you're eating. Like, it's, But when the food is ready, it's literally like everyone has their plate. The other thing is, if you're going to a party now, there's no big table. It's not Christmas dinner. No, everyone's not sitting around a table like that. You find somewhere to perch your bum, anywhere.
Any spot.
A stone, a rock, a fence, a wall, on the floor.
Seated.
Like you will see, like me and my cousins, you'll see us big adults, big in your 30s and 40s. We're sitting cross-legged on the floor because we're holding this plate, we're eating. That's, and it is that, like, everyone's eating at the same time, and I guess because you want to eat it when it's hot as well. Literally everyone is eating, you're chatting, you're cracking joke, whatever it is, and it does feel like a ceremony. It does feel like a celebration. So
so we kind of touched on kids when you were talking about kids being part of that as well, and so I'm wondering, so you've got twin girls and you've got an amazing son, and so I'm wondering, is this something that you've learned so that you can teach them, or in what way are you passing your culture, your heritage down to your children?
I definitely think it's important for them to know and be exposed to it. So even from a young age, they were eating Sadza. From when they could taste solids, it was like, they taste it. And actually, it's one of those foods that's really good for, like, from babies, for children, for young, because of the texture, because it's soft. Obviously, you have to cool it down a little bit, but, and then the things that you eat with generally are soft, are put up aside from, like, the meat. So it's something that they can have from young. It's also, you can always also have something that we call porridge. Okay. So it's made from the same maize in the same way, except you cook it for a short period of time, so it doesn't get as sort of, not hard, but as thick, basically. And then so once that's ready, cool down, you put it in a bowl, your cereal bowl, whatever it is, and you can add milk, you add sugar. Most of the time you add sugar to it. You can have a savory version, so it's kind of like cornmeal porridge, I would say. But I think it's a smoother texture. But so again, from young, babies can have that as a porridge. So it's just really easy. It's been really easy to kind of introduce my children to it and make sure that they're always exposed to it. Whenever they go to their nana's house on a Saturday, there's Sadza. They know that. They know what it looks like. They know what it tastes like. So, and hopefully it's something that as they grow, I'll be able to teach them how to cook it, and it's something that they can expose, I don't know, their friends to, their future partners, their kids, whoever. My husband, who's Ghanaian, he eats it, he likes it.
Which actually I was coming on to, which is that, so being of a household that's Ghanaian, from Zimbabwe and British, what does food look like for you? And so aside from Sadza, or including Sadza and maybe kind of some other dishes that you might have learned, what does it look like, and how important is it for you to make sure that your children are experiencing both cultures, or all three cultures maybe?
I think it's important. I do think it's part of who we are, isn't it? It's part of our heritage, and I think my husband and I are very intentional about making sure that our kids know sort of where we're from and have that experience. We always talk about the trips that we want to take them on. I'd love to take them back to Zimbabwe to see where I grew up and where we lived, all that kind of stuff. And so I think while we're not able to do that right now, pandemic, all that kind of stuff, we can find other ways to do it. And I think part of that is food. I think food plays a big part. Everyone has to eat, so it plays a big part. So I would say, like, in our home, I think we probably eat, I'd say we probably eat more traditional Caribbean and African dishes than we do British food. We have your usual spaghetti bolognese because we have kids, but like, to be honest, I feel like once they get to teenage, they're going to be looking at me like, I don't want no spaghetti bolognese, mum. Like, literally, one of them already, she's like, I don't really like pasta like that. So, but, the other thing is that although, because I am of mixed heritage, I would say my granddad is, I don't know if I mentioned this in the beginning, his ancestry is Pakistani. So, so growing up, we ate a lot of curries. We still do. And so, again, that's another big part of the food that we eat. So it might be a curry yesterday, like dal. I'm sure dal is lentils, curry lentils. So we have like dal one day, and then the next day it might be jollof rice. The next day it might, we're having a whole rice and peas, jerk chicken, the whole shebang. And then, then we might have a spag bowl. And then, you get your usual takeaway, chicken nuggets and chips or whatever it is, fish and chips, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But so I think we try to make sure that there's a good mixture of food from our different cultures included. And just trying to expose our kids as much as possible, because I think it's important. It's part of who they are, and I don't want them to lose that.
And I think I know what your answer might be, but why is it important, or why do you think it's important for us to know who we are, like in terms of identity and being connected, I guess, to our heritage? Such a loaded question. Sorry, that's such a big question.
It is a big question, but for me, I think, I don't think there's any simple answer to it, but I think it's important for us to know who we are and where we come from in order for us to be able to kind of figure out where we're going. I know that probably sounds very, very cliche, but
no, I agree.
Yeah, I just think if you don't know who you are, if you don't know where you're coming from, like you probably won't even be able to explain some of the things that you say, you do, you think, you feel. I feel like there's a lot of traditions, like our parents do things in a way, I think people often talk about it when they have babies, like your mum will tell you, have you done this? Or, there's something that you do, and it's like, if you don't understand why you do it, you just do it because your mom told you, she did it to you, your grandma did it to her, But I think it's important for us to know the whys. Once you know the whys behind it, then...
Oh, you're frozen a little bit. You hear me?
And cherish it a lot more.
Yeah.
And I think, for me, I just think it's important that my kids definitely know why, I think I don't know, it might sound a bit weird.
Go on, say it.
But I feel like, for me anyway, having been born in Africa, there is Africa in me, there is Zimbabwe in me, and I won't ever be able to get rid of that. And I feel like some of that is passed down to our kids. And so if I don't teach my kids, I feel like they will get to the stage where there's something there that they just don't understand, or they can't articulate.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? There's a connection that they feel to something, but they just don't know what it is.
Yeah.
And so I feel like it's important for us to try and maintain those connections so that they are aware,
Yeah. I think that you said it so beautifully, and it reminds me of a conversation that I was having with someone the other day who basically it wasn't even a conversation, he was teaching me something, and he was saying that think of someone like Prince Harry and Prince Charles. They know exactly who they are, so they carry themselves in a certain way. They know that they're royalty, so there's certain circles that they might mingle with, let's say, or not. But also there's a confidence that comes with that, because they know what's behind them, and so they can kind of know what's going ahead of them, so to speak. And so I think, likewise, it reminds me of when you said, if your dad were to be in Fulton Heath or Croydon, and then he were to find the leaf and suddenly he's picking it up, even if, let's say dinner's already planned, it's this kind of connection to this, I don't know, this kind of what's a pull to it, and so I think that you're so right in that it really is necessary. It's so paramount for our children, or for us as individuals, to know our roots, our identity, what we're connected to, so that I think it gives us a sense of purpose, and it gives us a sense of direction. And like you said, even if there's something kind of innate within us that wants to connect to something, and I think that heritage and identity is definitely a big part of that, or all of it, maybe. Yeah,
definitely.
I feel like we've flown through that conversation quite quickly. However, there's one more question that I'm going to ask you, and I think you've answered it, so not to labor a point, but Sadza, for you, would you eat that with a fork, or would you eat that with your hands? You definitely answered this question. I really should have thought of a different one.
It's all right. I'm going with my hands though. However, There has been an occasion where I've had to use cutlery.
When was that? Go on then. Disclaimers.
No, do you know what? I think when you have children, for me, when you have kids and you have to drop what you do at any second in time, there's just some times where, you know, if it's a celebration, if we're having a birthday party at the house and, you know, your mom's making sadza, I know that I'm not going to be able to sit and eat my meal in one go in peace. Yeah. There is going to be an interruption. And sometimes that interruption means I don't have time to go and wash my hands. So sometimes it's just easier to eat with a fork or a spoon. But it definitely tastes better with your hand. Like I don't know what it is, but
there's some special spice on the fingers.
Oh, it tastes so much better. Yeah. And I think, you know, if I think about like when we were in Zims, it adds to, like I was saying before earlier about it sort of feeling like a celebration, because I'm sure they do this in loads of other cultures as well, but someone will bring around a bowl and it's got water in it, and you wash your hands and there's a little towel on the side. Do you know what I mean? So it's, it just adds to that kind of, enjoyment of the food.
Yeah, the kind of going back to what we were talking about in terms of that ceremony and it being a communal thing. It's something for everybody to partake in. It's not an individual sport as much as it might feel like it when you're having to find, like you said, a rock or a fence or something. But actually, even if you're kind of being quite insular because you're enjoying it and you need to get through it quickly whilst it's hot, it's still a community thing. It's still where we're enjoying this as a family or sorry, actually, I know I said that was the last question, but what was your earliest memory of? Have you learned how to make it? Has any of your family members taught you how to make it? What was that like?
Yeah, so my mum taught me how to make it, and actually my dad it's one of the very few dishes my dad can actually cook. So it was. I feel like my mum taught us really young, like we were teenagers, I think. And I struggled. I'm not gonna lie, I struggled to learn. My sister actually got it quicker than I did. I don't know why that is, but it just happened that way. And but if I'm honest, I don't make it. Like it's just something that my mum makes it
better when your mum makes it.
Yeah, it's just one of those things, you know.
Yeah.
But I mean, when you're making it, there's a part where you kind of have to sort of pound. It's kind of between mixing and pounding. You have to I don't know. Like cream it.
Yes, I think I saw, because I was looking at videos on YouTube because I was curious, I wanted to see how it was made. And she said there was actually a word for the type of stirring. She was like, you don't just stir, there was a whole motion that went with it.
So you really have to you have to go around. It's not just the stirring thing, because what you're trying to do is pick up the bottom, put it onto the top, but at the same time you're trying to smooth it out so there's no lumps in it.
Right.
Because you can make a lumpy sadza and no one wants to eat sadza, put it in their mouth, and then there's a bubble of dry maize. No one wants that. So you need to do it properly. You need to, you know, but it's something that takes a lot of arm work and can be very tiring. So my mom will often start and be like, okay, come on, you need to do your share. And then, you know, I mean, it can get like that. If you're making one big pot as well, the bigger the pot, the more work you have to do. So, you know, like my cousin's been at the house, and my mum will be like, okay, I'm done. And he'll come and he'll do his part. And then, you know, so
it's a team sport.
Nice exactly, yeah. And there's nice elements of being able to share that with other people. So, yeah.
Oh, well, Shaz, it was so nice speaking to you today about Sadza. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing your stories about, kind of growing in Zimbabwe, coming over to England and holding on to your identity and the importance of passing that on to your children. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.